Welcome to Flesh and Pod, a flesh and blood podcast, breaking down weekly news and notes from the tournament scene, community drama, game strategy, and more. And now, here are your hosts, Darick and Logan.
Hello, and welcome to episode 89 of Flesh and Pod. My name is Logan. I'm your host, and with me, as always, is the progenitor of positivity, the newly standing bishop of Ballast, Darick Oswald. Darick, I've been waiting so long to ask you this question, and today I get to do it. Darick, what did you get up to in Flesh and Blood this week?
I didn't get up to anything.
What?
Yeah, nothing to note. We're not going to talk about that.
We are going to talk about it. We are going to talk about it.
No.
You were gung ho.
Do not
super excited to.
We don't talk about things that were attempted when you have little to no sleep whatsoever. So
you were ultra excited to play your spicy Uzuri list at skirmish, and you had the opportunity to do so. Did you attend said skirmish and pay an entry fee and play at least one round of Flesh and Blood?
I did not. No, I did not.
Okay, so what part of this is untrue?
There's nothing untrue thus far.
So you did?
No, like I did not play. I unfortunately had an unforeseen conflict and complication upon driving home. So for those who don't know, Logan is correct. I was absolutely gung-ho about trying to do everything I could in my power to play in any skirmish whatsoever, because I was very sad about not playing it in any of them this season. And we were casting an event on Saturday, and I found last minute that there was a skirmish in Michigan on a Sunday, and it would have been my last opportunity. And so I left Saturday and I drove home with the intent of then getting up and then making an even further drive to play in said skirmish. But when I got home, I was given some other tasks that needed to be completed, and I was then not able to attend.
Darick, you had one job, and that was to be the person that actually fucking did something in Flesh and Blood this week.
I know. And
you didn't.
I know. So now the good news is that as we can see, I'm also repositioned. I'm in the process of still revamping my office, but a big driver, a big motivator of this is that I got myself this new sit to stand workspace, in part because I also, on the other side of this, where you can't see at the moment, have taken my old desk and I have hopefully set this up in a way where this camera that you're seeing me on, if you're watching us on YouTube, and if you're listening, well, too bad. But this camera can swing around and then point down much easier based on the new mount. And then I also still have another second camera source along with some portable lights. And so the table on the other side of this is hopefully going to be a spot where I can start recording tabletop content. So that will also mean for physical card games, but also by revamping all of this, I'm kind of redoing my streaming setup to hopefully make a return to that soon. In fact, I have an email that popped up recently. My streamerversary is coming up. If you're not familiar with that, it's the date when you are partnered with Twitch, and there's like some cool benefits and bonuses when your streamerversary comes around. So my goal is have all of this done by the time that rolls around, and then I'm going to stream Talishar for quite a few hours. I'm going to start doing
Baldur's
more
Gate 3.
content. Yeah, doing more content oriented stuff just in general. But that includes for Flesh and Blood, as well as some other tabletop endeavors that I've wanted to do for a while. But it's been kind of a long time coming. It's weird. We had the pandemic, and prior to that, I had only made really digital oriented content, right? All the card games I played were digital. Esports stuff I covered was all digital. So I didn't really have any reason to have the gear in the setup. But now that I've taken that dive back into Flesh and Blood and other card games, and also some really sweet board games that I've picked up, I want to start doing more with that. So this has all been kind of a long time coming, but yeah, I'm trying to not be like too upset about how my weekend ended, and so I'm focusing on the positives, which is that late last night I got to do a bunch of stuff on my office, and it's still not done, but it's getting closer, and that's what I'm choosing to focus on.
Well, seeing as how I did not know that you didn't make it until
Yeah,
I
I
asked the
didn't make
question,
it.
I was very excited to hear about your trials and tribulations piloting Azuri at the Battle of the Creek, and I am sad that you were not able to make it, because that at least would have given us something that we did in Flesh and Blood for a week, because this last few weeks has not been the case of fucking anything.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of it is my fault just because of the weekend excursions, and it does make it difficult. I did really want to play in this one. I'm so that's another actual like interesting bit. I'm at the point now where I'm also going to try, I think, to lobby one of my local stores to change their armory night, or at least see if they're open to it, because right now everything is on Wednesday nights. And Wednesday nights are not very good for me, because that is when several new projects are occurring, like weekly for me. So I like work all day in the office, and then I don't get home till 5:30, and then I spend anywhere from 2 to 3 hours recording different projects at different times. And so I don't know when I'm gonna get to play, and I just really like to play Flesh and Blood. So I'm gonna see if I can get somebody to move something to like a Tuesday or Thursday to make my life a hell of a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, we're at kind of a crossroads here right now, because attendance is down for the shop that's the most local to me. And I know there's a confluence of reasons for that. One, it's summer, and even in last summer the same thing happened. There was a major dip in attendance. Plus, like, right now there's not much to keep locals excited. There's no pro quests, there's no RTNs, there's no step up level events that feel like there's something to be preparing for. Instead, it's just kind of going through the motions, which is, bro, it's fucking August. Like, this is what December should feel like. But because of the single pro tour this year and the single pro quest season, you're missing an entire swath of those types of tier 2 or whatever they call them, local events. And so people just aren't there. They've pulled back a bit, and I get it. Like, it is summer, and there is lots of shit to do in the summer. Absolutely. But at the same time, I think if we had those things to kind of aim for, we wouldn't see as much of this sort of contraction that we're seeing. But there's a lot I need to talk through with sort of the local group, because there are some that flit in and out. There are some that I know that sometimes they can make Thursdays, which is when we usually do them, and sometimes they can't. I don't know if that's an issue. I don't know if it's time, if we need to move it to earlier, starting it earlier. I just don't know what to do. And I'm very guilty right now, because I haven't been here for 2 weeks, because I went to Gen Con, which was no regrets. No regrets. I would 10 out of 10 do it again. Gen Con was great, had a blast, loved every second of it. Idiozos twice. Like, what else do you want? And then stayed in Ohio to cast the Alpha Clash 1K with you, which, again, blast. Do it again. 10 out of 10. I'd probably change Airbnbs. But the murder Airbnb that tried to kill me is still, a thing. So I got to be aware of that.
You just have to commune with it like I did.
Yes, you stood in the murder spots and and tried to commune with the spirits of the dead, and apparently it worked great for you.
Yeah.
But But again, wouldn't change it for the world. There wasn't a ton of people in the Alpha Clash tournament, but I had a blast casting it. I don't know if I was any good at it, but at least people seemed to enjoy it. We had people in the stream and chat was lively. Discord was lively. I mean, it was, and we actually had good matches to cast. It was not, it was an enjoyable game to talk about. Much like Flesh and Blood is, right? Like it was, so I kind of like casting that event, even though it wasn't Flesh and Blood, got me going, God, I really want to play something. Well, Alpha Clash is difficult for me to play because of any number of reasons. And I don't really want to play Lorcana. And so it's like, well, Flesh and Blood, in my opinion, is still the best game out there as far as mechanics and as far as the system goes. And granted, I mean, not saying that Grand Archive or Alpha Clash or Battle Spirits, which I doubt is Bandai, or One Piece, or again Bandai, or whatever, would not eventually be able to get to the spot that Flesh and Blood has put itself in. It's just that Flesh and Blood happens to be an amazing system built with a lot of care as to what they do with it. And because of that, they have a compelling game. That being said, I've also heard from people that they think this is the most boring meta of CC that they've ever been in.
Which is so wild to me because it's so diverse.
But that's the thing, is diversity can often feel like things are homogenized. And say what you will about your Starvo metas or your Chain metas or your Cheerio Briar metas, there was a boogeyman. There was something to target. And the spice was flowing in all directions.
Sure.
So variation was, while there was 3 Starvos in every top 8 or whatever, the variation that was coming out of other lists to try to make sure they didn't lose to Starvo in the top 8 was actually compelling. And Starvo mirrors were skill testing. I don't give a shit what anybody says. Starvo mirrors were awesome.
So they were, but so this is an interesting bit, and we're probably getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here because I know that we kind of wanted to talk about the meta in general, but I think that the reason that some folks, and I'm not saying this is everybody, but I think the reason that some folks might feel like this one is pretty boring is because, as you said, there's not really necessarily something to target. And when that happens, then you just have to be better. Like I don't want this to sound condescending, and I don't want it to sound like, just get good, bro. But when you don't have the ability to play like I want to target a matchup, right? But for example, as somebody who's played a lot of Bravo, a lot of times when I, in the Bravo Prism whatever era, very early in the game, like I would target some matchups, and then I would also just accept that Prism was an auto loss because that's the way that it was. And then you kind of play matchup roulette and hope you get some favorable pairings or whatever, right? There's not really many matchups in the current meta that are so polarized to that extent, which then means you are like, every matchup might feel the same, but that's because every matchup is a slog because you're skill tested every matchup. Like, I don't think that there is any free wins either. And as a result of that, like, you've just got to be on your best game. So like, I get it. Some people are going to love this meta. I'm sure some people will potentially not like it, but I'm really still excited about Flesh and Blood, and I'm constantly like itching to play it. My biggest issue is that
so hold on. This is fun.
No, you're fine. Just Mr. Miyagi it or whatever.
I think I got it. I think it's dead.
Yeah, my biggest issue is just that the games that I really enjoy right now, and the games that I'm also like wanting to cover and want to do more for, part of the reason that, I'm even just driving this revamp in my office, are all games that are on nights I can't get to regularly, right? So it's like Flesh and Blood Armories right now. There's 2 places locally. They both do it on Wednesday night, which just baffles me that they're on the same night, but they both do it on Wednesday night. And Wednesday's just really bad for me right now, and it has been for a long time. And then Battle Spirits, again, I covered the Pro Tour for it. I've got another gig coming up at the end of the month where I'm casting it, and I do enjoy that game. Mechanically, I think it's very interesting, but those are on Thursday nights, and that's like the second worst night for me. Like Wednesdays are the worst night, Thursdays are literally the second worst night. So outside of Wednesdays and Thursdays, the only time I can play those games is weekends. And
which are also bad for you.
I'm traveling a lot for gigs, which is a good problem to have. It's just very hard because, you know, I love covering games, but I kind of like to play them too. And I just feel like I'm in this like weird drought where I'm spending so much time talking about them, and I just need like a weekend where I sit and play.
Yeah, I've definitely felt that kind of pull to take a weekend, or a long weekend, kind of a Friday through Monday somewhere, and just sit with a bunch of friends that don't get a chance to do that, like that just don't get a chance to play. So like yourself and Flake, and then some of the other casters that you guys know that don't get to play as much, or whatever, and just bring a bunch of decks for games, just random game like that. What do people cover? Like bring it. And so you can just sit down and jam with people and just be able to play without a care in the world, right? There's something that is done locally here every year that I've missed out, sadly, because again of just how utterly fucking busy I get. I'm going to try to make it, I think, this year, but it's going to cut close. But it's a thing they do called the Gentleman's Cube, which is a bunch of guys. They you have to dress in a suit while playing, by the way. We'll take out an Airbnb in the middle of nowhere, and you get 16 people, so 2 draft pods worth, and then there are 2 copies of the Vintage Cube, and then everybody also has Vintage, which is Magic, and then also have Vintage legal Magic decks. These are all proxied, by the way. We're not dragging $500,000 worth of cards out, and it's a competition to see who is the greatest gentleman of them all for the year. And it's such a cool concept. It's like, why can't we do something like that where we have some kind of like gauntlet of all these different games? And so you kind of have to learn them all, because most people cover or at least make content for 2 at minimum. And why don't we just get some people together and kind of do something like that? I think that would be fun as hell to just, when Star Wars Unlimited is out, just get Flesh and Blood, Star Wars Unlimited, Battle Spirits, One Piece, Alpha Clash, fuck it, My Hero Academia, whatever, and just go out there and be like, all right, if you don't know the game, you've got 20 minutes to learn it and then time to jam. So good luck. Otherwise, do your fucking research and then make a competition out of it. I think that sounds fun as hell.
I'm game.
Well, I know
because I've probably played enough of them anyway where my amount of required research will be not that bad. Like I definitely would have to do some, but
we would make the grand finals be dead TCG roulette though.
I'm still game.
So put them on a wheel and let's go. And spin the wheel. Are we going to be playing Spellfire? Are we playing Scythe? Are we going to be playing Hex? I mean, there's just this giant litany of really shitty TCGs, or just TCGs that came out at the same time as every other TCG of that era, and so they just got swept aside. That we can just sit down and play. I mean, we put everything on that board and just see what happens. That would be hilarious. It would be fun. And something like that just sounds like the most fun. I don't know. Maybe I'm just like, maybe I'm just wilding. And maybe I'm just thinking of like, okay, how can we do some different cool shit to sort of make sure the spark never dies for the things that we enjoy? Because, I've talked about it on here last week. And I do apologize to anybody that was just like, wow, that was too deep last week. Y'all need to go back to being fucking idiots. Well, I'm back home, so I can be a fucking idiot again and feel fine about it. But I just kind of want that to like always keep the fire lit, for whatever we're doing. And sometimes like playing those other games can inform how you think of other games as well. So it's always just a good exercise, I think, to just broaden your horizons a little bit. This is where you say something.
Sorry, I was looking up what I wanted to contribute to the dead TCG
The dead TCGs
wheel, and I think I've landed on one.
Okay.
I was I'll be honest, I was having like a bit of a flashback to Nam moment where I was like, oh look, I looked at this list and I unlocked a core memory because I'd forgot about it until this moment. That Shadowrun had a card game, and I
had a very good one.
Yeah, I am adding that to the wheel.
I mean, absolutely. We can, I mean, and everybody can like, we can actually do a thing where everybody contributes 2 dead TCGs to the wheel.
You know,
And
hashtag totally a free ad. Recently on Wampa Radio, we talked about the card game Redemption, the Christian trading card game.
The Christian trading card game. Keith from the Realm was actually a champion.
Yeah.
At Redemption. And so that's a real thing.
But that's also still being printed, so technically it's not a dead card game.
It's not dead TCG. Okay.
Like it still gets support.
All right. I mean, technically Star Wars CCG is also not dead. So it actually does not qualify. Not that they can't legally print cards, but there's a world champion every year. But a dead game would be something akin to the X-Files TCG. Or Alias.
Yeah, I remember X-Files.
Marvel Overpower.
So it's so funny. Marvel Overpower is the reason I like actually made the dive into card games. Like I started with Magic like everybody. Right? I started with Magic like everybody, but then I like for whatever reason Magic wasn't initially clicking for me. I think it's just because some of the early cards were very like needlessly wordy. Like this is going to sound dumb, right? But to a 10-year-old kid, when you're trying to pay attention to like the text on a card that matters, there's a big difference between like, you know, Mons Goblins Raiders.
Goblin Raiders, baby.
Right. Which has like a paragraph of flavor text.
Not real text.
And then cards with real text, and like I'm supposed to know the difference between the two. Like I didn't understand what was going on. I was 10 years old, right? So then
if it's italicized in quotes, it's flavor text.
Sure. Right. But like I was 10. So like I started with Magic and I was playing it, but it wasn't like clicking for me. And then when I tried Marvel Overpower, not, you know, paragraphs of flavor text. Obviously I was a huge comic nerd, a bunch of things that like actually I cared about it. And then I learned that game enough to understand like the joys of actually playing the game. Whereas Magic was like I was playing it, but it wasn't clicking. And then after learning Overpower, when I went back to Magic, then everything like re-clicked for me, and then I was done for. But it's very weird that like I started with Magic, but Marvel Overpower is actually the reason that I'm the giant card game nerd that I am today.
I'm telling you right now, I'm putting Babylon 5 and WWF Raw Deal on the TCG wheel.
Raw Deal, like the Kane deck used to be my jam.
There's the JBL combo deck where you couldn't lose if once you started the combo.
Yeah, once you started
before that, there was the APA deck, which again, just once you started going, you couldn't lose. There's one redeeming feature of that card game, because the card game was just a bunch of power gaming bullshit. It was awful. But there's one redeeming feature. And the redeeming feature was you could not have 2 of the same wrestler represented in the top 8 of the tournament. So you had to be the top ranked wrestler. So it'd be like if you could only ever have one of each hero,
right,
in the top 8. So like
you could be 2 and 4 on the day, but if you're the best Kane in the room and you're the 8th wrestler, then listen, if you've heard me say the word Kane twice, that's because this was my story of every tournament I played it.
Well, right.
The Kane deck was not good, but like I just really liked choke slamming people.
Well, choke slam from hell. So think about this in Flesh and Blood terms, though. Like, let's say you're going to an event, right? And Icelander is winning everything. You have to be the best Icelander in the room in order to make the top 8. Not just do well. You have to be the best Icelander in the room. Otherwise, if there are a bunch of Icelanders sitting at the top tables, like there could be a 2 and 6 Reinar or some shit that just sneaks in. That's why that game was that they had that incredible mechanic was just always sat well with me. I'm just like, yes, perfect. The
I
uniqueness rule
actually
was really
I
cool.
liked it because it rewarded metagaming. Like if you
Yeah.
knew, but then you just get blown out in the top 8. So like it kind of balanced, but it was funny.
I mean, but sometimes like a deck was designed to just beat the top deck, and that's it. So there was a lot of that too. Like it wasn't a good game, but that one little piece I thought was always really cool. But again, I'm gonna put a pin in this. I'm gonna come revisit this idea because I think that we should do something like this, even if we do it on the boat or we do it, sometime in like a dead period and just all head out for a 4-day weekend to just do something crazy like this. I think that'd be a blast. That was
I
completely off the cuff. That was not even in the show notes. We're not even in news and notes
Yeah,
yet. We have
we're not
spent
even
25 minutes on this
using
bullshit.
You're right. I feel like we should coincide this with some event so we have like an excuse to play in the event, but then also like do the thing for an extra day. Specifically somewhere around like trying to
First
think of
week of
what's
December.
central the most to everybody. Like if we I don't know when the next one would be, but if we schedule something like in the Minneapolis area, I think that like that's a short flight for me. Flake has friends there. Doa just moved
I'll say
there.
Doa just moved there.
Easier for like you.
Super
Like the
simple for me.
hardest person. Like there's some folks that would have to travel farther depending on if they wanted to
Well,
come from the south.
Cosmic is in New Jersey.
No, Cosmic's like an hour from me. He's
so he's in Michigan. Okay.
Ypsilanti, Detroit area.
Okay, and then I don't know where Mitch is. So
Well, he's LA, I'm pretty sure. I think he's still out west, but I was
And
just
then
trying
you
to think of like DM
Sam would-
Ramada is kind of south.
Steven's easy because he's in he's in a place that's airport easy. Like Sam O'Byrne would be pretty easy to drag in. That'd be a fun one because that kid has seen hardly any of this shit. So
Yeah.
that'd be a good time. But yeah, I mean, I think that this would be fun. This is something that we need to make sure we continue to talk through because I think that this would be fun. And honestly, with the people we know, we could probably actually get sponsors. So especially if we were like streaming this shit while we did it, which we probably would because why wouldn't we? Well, should we start with the actual show?
Yeah.
You think after 27 minutes of just complete nonsense?
Yeah.
I mean,
So
I'm almost
there
through
was
a
a
beer
Battle
already.
Hardened in Hong Kong.
There was.
Yeah.
Like this is the typical. Their meta is not our meta, and I love it because
Yep.
it always makes things more interesting. Now, the Blitz meta was very similar. It was Xing Sang on Chain with the win on the Battle Hardened. It was a Blitz Battle Hardened, and the top 8 was 3 chains, which is just patently incorrect. It should always be 2 chains, but there are 3. 2 Ira, which again very popular in the meta in Southeast Asia from everything we've ever seen in Blitz. That hero being printed in any Asian language would suddenly be $1 billion. If it was a promo like a Marvel, that thing would just be ultra expensive. 2 Kano, because reasons. I mean, some people forget AB or they don't play Oasis Respite, and that's all it takes. And then 1 Kasai, because there's always a Kasai. Like, every time. She's going to squeak in. No matter what, because the matchup lottery is, for Kasai, is Chain is bad for Kasai. And then if you don't get high rolled by Kano, everything else is winnable. So it feels fine. But there was also, and this was I don't know if you got to watch any of this. I watched the VOD back a little bit today. There was a CCPTI event that also happened.
Oh yeah, you mean this scripted finish?
It certainly looked like it.
That's my I have no idea. This is my tinfoil hat because if you're not familiar, Dash won the event in a squeaker against Briar.
Both players that won life.
I just like to call it scripted because it's, to me, part of the Briar conspiracy to keep her from living legend. So
yeah, so the way the way that it panned out is the Dash player was able to present a 2-card block with a Teklo core online, or a Teklo core online for 1 more boost of 2 resources to be able to T-bone and inside a block, Pulse Wave Harpoon, get 2 cards. And then the zipper hit, it had to be exactly red zipper hit, and it was, or red throttle, or no, zipper hit. It was zipper hit. Had to be exactly red zipper hit because it had to be for 5 because there was an embodiment involved, and the Briar player had a Channel Mount Heroic with an embodiment of Earth, so would have blocked 4, but the 5 came in for 1 extra to do to finish off the Briar, and it was just like, man, that was so close.
Yeah.
I was seat of my when I went back because I didn't see it live. I just saw somebody tweet about, hey, like that final was nuts, and I'm like, okay, there's got to be a VOD, and I went and found it, and I was watching the gameplay, and I was like, okay, well, this doesn't look that close. The dash has kind of come out of the booth a little bit, and I'm like, okay, well, the Briar is actually just now corner turning and pressing the advantage, resolved the channel, did a lot of damage, did a lot of work, and then all of a sudden, the dash was just like smashy, landed a Teclo Pounder, and was just like smashy. And I'm like, okay, well, shit, this is Teclo Pounder versus Channel Mount Heroic. This is fun. And then eventually we were at that spot where it was 1-1, no arcane barrier left for the dash player. In came a Coax of Commotion that hit, and the Briar player with the dash player going to 1 chose no modes, which might have, okay. And I thought like maybe gaining 1 life there was going to be important, considering there is no AB sitting on the other side anymore. So those Rosetta Thorns, if you can get a 2-2 off, it ends the game immediately. And I was just like, or just if you can make 2 rune chants like in any given turn and just attack, you win. But I'm like, okay, well, we're making it so that any rune chant is lethal. Okay. And and then the dash player just had the exacties for the win. I was like, dang, that was close. But I very, very much so recommend watching that match. It was actually really well played on both sides. That top 8 was 2 dash, a Bravo, 2 Icelander, a Briar that we talked about, Lexi, and a Dorinthia. So no Dromize yet again. Only the 1 Ranger. The Lone Ranger. I hate myself. So let's get that fucking Smucker's face off, you piece of shit. You know this is your fucking fault. And God damn it. And I don't know what to think about this time. I mean, like, again, we do see dash pop up a lot in Asian events as well. Like that's been pretty common. What do you think? Like where does that put your head with dash bringing this in against Briar and Icelander not converting?
I think for me, the thing that stands out here, if I'm being honest, is just that, you mentioned like meta is different, but I think it's more than that. I think it's play styles are just different, because it's not even just that the meta is different, but when I'm looking at the heroes that are doing well, everything is proactive. And so I think that the reason that we're not seeing, like an Icelander pop up, for example, is just that people really like to be like jamming 4-card hands.
Yeah, I think you're right. I should have been clear about this when I talked about it. When I was talking about the meta being different, I was also like being kind of inclusive of playstyle, and I should have been clearer. But you're right, because when you looked at the meta breakdown for the event with 67 players, the 2 most played decks were 10 Icelander and 9 Lexi, which is part and parcel with what we've been seeing.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're 100% correct.
I just think that, I don't think it's necessarily a representation thing. I think it's just more like a familiarity thing. It just feels like that region feels more comfortable on decks that do the thing. I'll be honest, I'm a little surprised Lexi didn't necessarily have an appearance, but like I'm not surprised that Icelander is not taking it down necessarily, just because I think that sometimes we forget, like, there's a lot that Icelander has to have go her way to be very successful into aggressive decks over and over and over. And I know there's been a lot that's been said about cards like Warmonger's Diplomacy, for example, which is an incredibly powerful effect. And Icelander is still a very viable deck. There's a reason it keeps winning events, but it's not unbeatable. And when you have a field of like experienced aggressive players that are just like going to punish a slow hand, I'm not even going to say misplays. I'm just going to say, like, if you have a bad hand and they can punish it, then you're going to have a harder time pulling out a win. So I think that's a bit of it, but all I'm seeing, like, this is the big thing that I took away from Hong Kong. I want to play an event in Hong Kong because I feel like, no, hear me out. It's one, like, Hong Kong would just be great to visit.
Yeah, Hong Kong would be fun.
It'd be great. But I just feel like that's a room full of people that are my people, because my phrase that I've been saying for the past 5 years, since I started making content for card games, is math is for blockers, right? Like that was what I said in Hearthstone and Tessel, in Legends of Runeterra. Like I'm a math is for blockers kind of guy. So Tessel. I like, yeah, that was the Elder Scrolls Legends.
Oh, Elder Scrolls Legends. Okay.
We called it Tessel for short. Just like I'm already calling other games bad acronyms that people don't like. So Star Wars Unlimited, in case you were wondering, is SWU.
Well, okay. I used to call Star Wars the Old Republic sweater, and it pissed people off, so I get it.
Yeah, well, because, you know, us gamers call it SWOTOR, but...
Sweater.
That's because the people who called it SWOTOR are the diehards that wanted it to be the MMO of KOTOR, and so they just adapted. Anyway, here's the thing. The point I'm trying to make is this, it feels like every time I see any event from like the APAC region, basically, I just know it's like a room full of my kind of people, right? I want to do some event there at some point in my lifetime because it just feels like it's going to be a lot of fun. Just give me that all gas, no brakes.
Oh, I mean, you know, that's my favorite phrase. Just all gas, no brakes. Let's go. So I do like that attitude, honestly. I think that's it's refreshing coming from how sort of grindy the North American events can be.
Yeah, you know, like, don't get me wrong. Play whatever hero you want. I'm not going to yuck your yum. And obviously win your events, but I can only play into Oldhim so many times, man. Give me these 5 mirrors.
You fucking can't now.
Well, sure, but, you know, give me these 5 mirrors, right? I want to blink and have the game be over so that we can shuffle up and play 2 or 3 more games while we're waiting for the round timer to end. Like, that's what I enjoy, right? Give me more games for my buck.
We called that the love letter bracket back in Magic, where we had this group of people that were all playing aggressive, put them to the question type decks, and then we would all go have an appointed meeting spot for when our round ended, and we would just start shuffling up and playing love letter, waiting for the next round. And so, yeah, I get it. We did it all the fucking time. And that's because none of us wanted to be playing that much Magic, to be honest. We wanted to be done with Magic as soon as humanly possible. And so, just so we could do other shit that we wanted to do. But if we were winning, we were winning, right? You're not gonna just say, well, I came, I won a couple of rounds and I dropped. Like, okay. It's not that I never did that, because I 100% did that. But it's more along the lines of you were going for other reasons, and some of that was to just hang out with a love letter bracket. And so it was great. We had a good time doing that shit. So with Nationals in Vegas coming up and next weekend, so we're only at this juncture, 10 days out, give or take? 11 days out. So 10 days after this post. But where do we think the meta is right now? So you're familiar with, I'm guessing, I guess I should say, you're familiar with the level concept, right? Of decks, of how this works?
No.
Okay. So level 0 is the consensus best deck, right? It's the level 0 play. It's the best thing to be
S tier.
S tier, correct.
You got to speak to my weeb brain.
Oh Is that doing it, you fuck?
Yeah, helps.
Jesus, okay. So in this case, level 0, level 0 is Icelander. Level 1 is going to be the best deck to play into level 0, right? And so in this case, from everybody I've talked to, that's Lexi. You play Lexi into Icelander with the idea that Lexi is going to be able to beat Icelander.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start going from there. So then level 2 would be, okay, what beats Lexi? That's level 2. And then you compare that to level 0. Can it win the level 0 matchup? No. Well, fuck. Go to level 3. You know, so it's the next best deck into Lexi. Can that beat level 0? And no. Until you just go, you know, so is there something we can be doing better? Because if you can beat the 2 best decks, typically you're in a good spot, especially in split formats.
Yeah. The deck that I think has the best chance, I don't think is the best to beat them, right? But the best chance to have a good matchup into both is Dromai. So like if you were asking me like what's the true level 2, like what's the best deck to beat Lexi, I wholeheartedly feel like it's Bravo. I think Bravo just shits on Lexi when they know
either
what
Bravo or Azalea. It's one of the two.
It's really good into Lexi, right? The problem is that against a good Icelander, Bravo can beat Icelander, but against a good Icelander, it is a nightmare. I say this as somebody who's played a lot of games on that matchup and did my absolute best against, you know, Majin Beta calling where, you know, we were going good. Yeah, that he top aided and we were going good. And we even talked about it afterwards. He was like, you know, I felt like I was in trouble until you had that one bad hand. And that's all it took, right? Like I had one offhand and then he pulled ahead and I still made it competitive, but like he got the victory. Whereas if I didn't have that hand that was like all blue, because I remember it very vividly, it was all blues, no relevant attacks. So I couldn't keep the pressure on him. Basically in that matchup, if you're playing against a good Icelander and you are in a scenario where you're just swinging a Nothos and trying to AB, you've probably already lost. I know that sounds very hyperbolic, but that's kind of the truth. You are the aggressor. You kind of have to race in that matchup because long term, like I know it sounds very weird, but like unless you have AB5, which I did not, I had AB3. Unless you have AB5, you cannot just block out Icelander. So inevitability just stays on their end. It's a very nuanced thing. So anyway, this is my long-winded way of saying I really think the true level 2 is probably Bravo. I think Azalea's also up there. But I don't think that Bravo is good into Icelander. I do think Dromai is capable of beating Lexi. We saw, you know, going into Pro Tour Baltimore, we saw a lot of folks say like Lexi absolutely dominates that, but then Dromai's did very well. So I think that a practice Dromai is certainly winnable into Lexi and obviously certainly winnable into Icelander. So I think that is a deck that if you have a lot of reps on and you're comfortable with, you could have some really good results. I know that we haven't seen them win an event yet, but we have seen them pretty routinely in the top 8s. And I think it's only a matter of time before another one does really well.
Yeah, so our level 2 here, if we call that Bravo, we call our level 3 Azalea. Azalea dies to Warmongers. That's it. Yeah. That's the tweet. Like, you're fucking dead. It's terrible in Icelander. So that's not the answer. Dromai, if we put that down into like the level 3, level 4 area alongside Azalea, okay, you got game against both. You're not great into like a 36 popper Bravo though. And so if people are going to be playing Bravo to leverage the Lexi matchup, you know, you're in trouble. Yeah. So there's a lot of like decision points here, and they start with what you accept the best deck to be. And right now, I think you'd be foolish to not think the best deck is Icelander, just because, I mean, but I guess I should walk that back. The events that Icelander won were won by Rhea Adams and Majin Bay. Those are not slouches. Those are incredible players. And to say that the player had nothing to do with the victory is very reductive. Those were, especially Rhea's second win, was an utter masterclass in what to do in those matchups. That was razor thin. couldn't make a mistake, played to every single one of her base outs, and was able to squeak it out. It was very, very, very tight. So I am willing to hear people say, no, Lexi is the true zero. And believe them. Because a lot of time, so that, again, let's look at our spread here. So Lexi lost to Icelander, Nate Snyder versus Rhea Adams in Cincinnati, right? Hubris killed Lexi because Nate was like, hey, no AB, we're good to go. We don't have to worry about this shit. And then that got him smoked because that was not even like, that wasn't close. And the next one was Icelander Dromai. And again, Rhea played her ass off to get that win. And sometimes you play perfect, right? Sometimes you play basically mistake-free Flesh and Blood, although it's impossible to actually play mistake-free Flesh and Blood. But there's literally, you look at that match, you can dissect it turn by turn by turn, and it was always with an eye towards what does winning look like. Never in that game was Rhea playing to not lose. She was playing to fucking win the entire time. And that was vital to her winning that game. And then you look at Majin. Majin got a bit of a gift from his semifinals opponent. And then a little bit of a worn out Michael Fang that was playing a deck that we don't usually associate Michael with, where he also missed a trigger and Majin was able to take advantage, right? Like, that's part of the game, though. You take advantage of mistakes and you turn the corner on them. But if that's a mistake-free game on either side, does Icelander win? You don't know, right? Like, because that just changes the entire complexion. So I'm willing to listen to Lexi being level 0, but it's almost like you want to put both there. But if you're trying to just like dissect what you should be playing, that breaks the tree structure of how you decide how you can kind of break these things down. So I'm curious to you, would you swap those? Would you say that Lexi is level 0?
No, I would not say Lexi is level 0. My hot take is that I'm not even sure Lexi is level 1.
Oh, okay. What would you think level 1 is?
So hear me out, right? I think Lexi is a great deck, right? But I think the difference between like Lexi and Icelander, for example, is that Icelander, I think, is just more well-rounded. I think Icelander has less polarized bad matchups than Lexi's bad matchups. So I think Icelander is firmly the level 0. But when I look at Lexi, like, this is what I would ask you. What are the decks Lexi is good into, right? Like, if you're playing Lexi, what is the decks that you want to target that you're like, yes, I'm excited to be playing against?
Basically anything aggressive. So Briar, Fi, not so much like Katsu, yeah, which are not, and Boost Dash,
none
obviously.
of those, but here's the thing, none of these are the top decks.
No, I get it. Yeah.
If you're bringing a Lexi, and think about all the decks that we've named, right? If you're considering for an event running into Icelander, running into Bravo, maybe Dromai, then let's throw in a curveball like Azalea or Uzuri, right? Of those, like, let's just take those 5.
Put
like,
a pin in Uzuri. I want to talk about that one.
Sure, but like, of those, like, what are the ones you're actually like excited about? Not that you think you can win. I just mean that you're like, this is my good matchup. I'm excited. Let's go.
Yep, and I think it's those aggressive decks, but the difference being that Lexi has no predatory matchup against her. There's no.
I think she does. I think it's really bad into Bravo. I just have not. Maybe it's my quality of Lexi testing partners, and I'll fully concede that and whatever. But like, I've never felt bad about piloting Bravo into Lexi.
So that's interesting to me because Bravo is good into Lexi. I think we can accept that. That's established. But it's bad into Icelander. What in a split format with the top 8 being CC, is Bravo what you'd want to take into that, or do you feel like you're a knife into a gunfight?
So this is a two-sided answer. Me, I would be fine with it because I'm very comfortable on it. It is my comfort matchup because I have more games on that hero than any other in Flesh and Blood. So just from that perspective, I would feel confident, maybe to a fault, just because I have the reps, right? It would be very hard for me to come up with a new situation that was unexpected, and now I have to make a decision on the spot and second guess myself and whatever. But if I'm going against all of those instincts, and I'm just saying, all right, I'm an objective player, then no, I would want an Icelander personally over like a Bravo if I was going into that top 8. And it's strictly just because I think that Icelander does a lot of the same things that Bravo does right now, but just I think has a slightly better upside. That's the reason why I would prefer an Icelander, all things being equal. Now, again, I'm gonna pick Bravo just because I've got more reps on it. But I do think that, like I said, I think Icelander is right now the best deck in the format. But when I say best deck, I also just want to be very clear. I mean that it has the least number of disadvantages. This meta is a very interesting thing because it's not like there is a true boogeyman where, we think of like Starvo, for example. The deck was the result of some of the wins, not necessarily the pilot, right?
Chain.
Or Chain, right? Where, you Soul Shackle 5, you hit, especially old Chain, right? You hit like 3 seeds and a Rift Bind or whatever, and it's just like, oops, I win. Ooh, right? So like there's none of those scenarios.
How'd that go again?
Oops, I
Thanks
win.
You. Perfect.
Ooh.
That's all I needed. All right.
So the thing about this meta, and this is kind of what I was alluding to earlier, right? There's just not a lot of polarized matchups. So like even when I'm, sounding like I'm down on Lexi, it's not that I don't think Lexi is capable of beating any of these decks. Lexi can absolutely beat Icelander. I think Lexi can beat Dromai. I think Lexi can even beat Bravo. I think Bravo is favored though, right? And so that's what I'm talking about. It's just that these favorings are now, right now in this current meta, more like 60-40, or a lot of them are even more closer to like 55-45.
Yeah.
And I think that that's also why you have some people who do think this is potentially a boring meta, because there are no free wins, right? So like when I say, we're talking about, is Lexi the second best deck? And I'm saying like, well, like what are you even happy piloting it into? Well, it's not. When I say that, it's not because she can't win. It's just like every time you sit down across from someone, assuming they're a player of equal or better skill than you, you're going, all right, I'm in for a slog, or I got to do this right, right?
Yeah, right.
It's not the, Prism sits down across from Bravo and you're just like, well, like this was fun. There are
just played hard, I fucking guess. I don't know.
Yeah, there are no polarized matchups like that. And so I just firmly believe right now that is going to be a big factor for the national events that are coming up, right? I think that deck selection is important, but I think that it's also going to be an awful lot about what decks you're comfortable with. A little bit of matchup roulette, and also really just understanding that there are no free wins anymore.
Yeah.
Like I think that's the big one. There's no free wins.
There are 2 specific heroes I want to touch on really quick before we move on. The first one is your wheelhouse, is Uzuri.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think she sits in all of this? Now, considering what Uzuri can do with 2 and sometimes 1 card plus arsenal hands, where does Uzuri figure into the mix?
So it's interesting. One, I think it depends on which version of Uzuri you're playing. There is a more mid-rangey, more defensive version that can even shift its gears if needed into playing fatigue. And I think that one has some merit in events where you might catch your opponents off guard. And if you bring a heavy AB package and you can withstand Icelander, I think that you actually have an okay matchup there. But I do think that that particular version of Uzuri is going to run into problems against like a Bravo, because they're not going to out fatigue the good Bravo players, for example. So you're trading unfamiliarity of the matchup, like with your opponent, basically surprise factor, for just raw power. Now, the other one is the more aggressive, more redline one, and I do think that that one can be just as successful as a Lexi right now, if I'm being honest, with the recent nerfs that the Lexi list got with the, ban announcements and et cetera. I think that the redline Uzuri is pretty close to on par. It does not have the same high roll top end as Lexi, but your, like, what I would say, like, average turn expectancy, your average rate, is pretty on par. And I think that you can be just as successful with the aggressive version of Uzuri. I also, just being honest, think it's really good right now if you do expect a lot of Icelander, because Uzuri kind of doesn't care about Warmonger's diplomacy.
You're right. Right. That was my next thing, was like, it's a deck that doesn't give a shit about Warmongers. And I think that that's probably as important as anything else.
Yeah, doesn't care about that. And you, if you're worried about like the frostbite stuff and things like that from Icelander, a lot of times you've got an easy way to pay for that, because you're already paying, at a reduction for most of your stuff anyway, especially if you're doing the stealth bait and switch. You have a lot of wiggle room. So I do think it's a deck that can be successful. I don't think, I'm a Uzuri stan, but I don't think it's like one of the best decks in the format. I think that it is, it hurts me to say this out loud, because I want to say she's the best all the time, right? But I think in reality right now, she's probably a B plus tier deck. That pilot can make a big difference, and matchup roulette can make a big difference on how your day goes.
The other one that I want to talk about is Levia. Now, this is some polarizing shit, because I've seen a lot of people claim that Levia is insane and people are sleeping on her. And I've also seen people say that Levia just still has the same problem, that she just loses to herself. And I think personally that Levia is more pilot dependent than any other deck in this in this possible format, right? Because the game plan has to be executed and succinct. It cannot be deviated from very much at all in order to be successful. Where do you think Levia stands currently?
I think that Levia is probably in the same realm as where I would put Uzuri, in that it can catch some people off guard, and it can absolutely win games through aggression or through the mid-rangey, more what I'll describe as classic playstyle. 2 card blocks and swing for 6 until things line up, that sort of thing. It's got a lot of stuff that's going well for it. Big attacks, most everything blocks for 3, some explosive turns, but it doesn't have like a ton of relative on hit effects either. And if you don't set up your explosive turns, then it's a deck that can fall behind very quickly early. It's also susceptible to disruption. So, again, Bravo, for example, I've only lost one time to Levia, like, ever on Bravo. And that was, and I remember it very vividly, that was against my good friend, fellow caster, Casanova. We were playing on a table at a bar in Cincinnati.
Well done.
And we played 2 games and we went 1-1. And that was like literally the one time that I've lost to a Levia. And that's not because I'm a stellar player. I want to be very clear. It's that I think Levia is prone to running into its own problems with the deck, but it's also prone to being disrupted very heavily. So cards like a successful Spinal Crusher are very big. Cards like Crippling Crush, if you make them discard some of their, blood rushes or their key combo pieces, then they're going to have a bad time, so on and so forth. So it's a very good deck when it works. Absolutely capable of doing well. But as you said, I think it's pilot dependent, and I think it's a bit matchup dependent. And that's the same way that I graded Uzuri. I said Uzuri, I think, is a little bit more matchup dependent and a little bit more pilot dependent. I think Levia's in the exact same realm right now. So yeah, like I if I saw one, I even go as far as say if I saw two Levias in the top 8 at US Nats, I wouldn't be shocked, right? Certainly capable of doing it. But I also would not be shocked if I saw 0.
So last thing about U.S. Nationals before we move on. Give me your early breakout candidate for hero in this event.
Oh. All right. I don't even think that this is like truly a breakout candidate, but I'm just going to go with like what I would say is my sleeper. There is a hero that I think is also capable of top 8ing that we haven't mentioned at all in our discussions tonight, and so for that reason alone, I'm just going to say it. I think that Dash is actually in a decent spot in the meta right now as well, and that not enough people are necessarily giving her, I think, the respect that she deserves. Specifically, you know, we talk about how Icelander sometimes struggles against aggressive decks and whatever. The boost version of Dash don't give a fuck about Warmonger's diplomacy.
Nope, don't care.
So I could see, again, if it's a very Icelander heavy spot, a Dash player make a run, hit that top 8 very, very easily.
Yeah, mine is also on that same vein of thought where I'm looking for a deck that doesn't give a shit about Warmonger's diplomacy. I want that card to not be a factor whatsoever in what I'm trying to do. And the answer for me is Dorinthia. I think that, and even in Dorinthia, to take it a level further, can just play Warmongers. Because you can always go Dawnblade with a go again, Dawnblade with go again, and they block it out. You just go, cool, Warmongers pass, right? And that's, a straight up get fucked for some decks. So I feel like we're in a good spot, and I think that I would really, if I were playing, which obviously I'm not, but if I were playing, I would be focusing on decks that don't care about a Warmonger's recital, or Warmonger's diplomacy, sorry. And Dash is a good candidate for that, because again, boost Dash, don't give a shit. And Dorinthia would be my other pick. This is why I think Briar is in a hopeless spot, because Warmongers really just tears Briar in half. And it also, I feel bad for Azalea. Azalea got some tools, and she felt good. And then they're like, and here's this card that says Azalea doesn't get to play the game anymore. And it's like, oh, well, I guess you had your fun for a minute. Enjoy it. They just couldn't endure Azalea being great for too long. But I think that's where I'm at. Is find your best deck versus Warmongers, and it's a bonus if it gets to play Warmongers. And I think that for me, that probably is Dorinthia right now.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that. Dorinthia has some interesting matchups like into Dromai as well. So
yeah, you get to keep your Dawnblade counters basically all the time.
You know, I can see the appeal there. I think the biggest issue might just be that you'd have to be somebody who's already got a bunch of reps on Dorinthia. I don't think it would be very easy to just pick her up just for Nats. And there are absolutely some players that have the reps, and I think could make that transition. But I think that it would be the caveat that I would put there, because Dorinthia,
it takes work.
Dorinthia has, I think, a fair amount of nuance to certain matchups. I think some very easy to pick up, but like playing Dorinthia against Icelander is not easy just in and of itself. So, yeah.
All right, moving on. We're the 20K Realm Invitational Weekend is December 1st through 3rd in Columbus. We do have some new info about that event. So the 20K, which starts on Friday, that's December 1st, is a multi-format event. Do I know the formats? No. Sure don't. However, I do know that there's more than one of them. That's the information I have for that. It was confirmed that the Saturday Brawl has been upgraded to a 10K. So that'll be a 10K, I believe, Classic Constructed Brawl on Saturday. So even if you this is my best description. If you qualified for the 10 or the 20K and you didn't make day 2, well, here's the 10K. If you didn't qualify for the 20K but you still want to play some high-end Flesh and Blood for a lot of money, here's a 10K. And then if you really are interested in making sure you're good next year, the 10K qualifies for a 50K. And then after that, you get a 5K team sealed on Sunday, which, be still my heart. This is like for me. Feels very targeted towards me. You get a 5K team sealed on Sunday that also qualifies for a 50K. So, no notes. Great job. Pretty sure I'm into this. I mean, not pretty sure. I know I'm into this. So again, the gang over at the Realm just knocking it out of the park again. So if you are a Flesh and Blood player, and also I want to make sure I point out, if you are a player of other games as well, you are going to want to make sure that you're in Columbus on that first weekend of December 1st through 3rd, because this is going to be, as Darick likes to put it, Realm Con.
That's what it feels like.
There's going to be stuff happening all over the place, and it's going to be a guaranteed good time. So if you're going to show up for one thing this year, that's still, that you're like, I have room for one more thing, this is the one I would choose. Just full stop. So hashtag no free ads, but that would be my choice. Darick has nothing to add. Great. Would you like to do some listener questions, Darick?
I mean, no, but I suppose
we can skip them. Like, we're not contractually obligated.
No, it's fine.
Wow, look at this bitch.
The listeners. No, that's
fine.
We
kind of need them in order to
just want to show general disdain for the entire reason we do the show. No big deal.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I don't know. Like, I don't like to defend the fappers a whole lot because they named themselves fappers. But
last week we got in the feels a bit, and we might have made them feel a bit big for their britches. So every now and then, you got to hand it to them.
Or they need to buy new britches. One way or the other. We'll start with the, I guess, question asker emeritus at this point, Vintox, who asked, well, I don't have a question for this week that is pertinent to current news.
Good.
Great. No notes. We're moving. Oh, shit. It keeps going. And then it says one from the list. Recently in Ankeny, that is a town in Iowa. It is a suburb of Des Moines, although some people in Ankeny would fight me on that. The organizers got together and did a team sealed event focused on community building, where there were experienced team captains that were paired with newer teammates and had special rules, where the captains could help the new players whenever needed, as well as the occasional, and these are not occasional, sir. These are well curated and specialized events when you're talking about the Roadie Sack Pack Spectacular. So if you're wondering, if you've ever seen Dagan with an obnoxious fucking belt on, the reason that he has said obnoxious fucking belt is because he wins the Roadie Sack Pack Spectacular.
When's the next one?
Labor Day weekend.
I think I'm busy that weekend. I need to come and take that belt.
I mean, I invite anybody to come take that belt. The next event is Saturday, September 2nd. I will be trying my fucking best to get that belt. Like, the Sack Pack is truly a thing to behold.
If I could win that belt, I would wear it for every one of our podcast episodes. I would cut promos with it. I would do the full thing. Like, I need to get that belt.
Somebody just needs to take it off of Dagan. We've created a monster, and it needs to come off. But he asked, what other types of events do you think areas could use to bolster community engagement and building? And do you have any tips for convincing people to try out the game and potentially continue growing the local communities? I need help with this already, so go.
Yeah, there are, I think, a number of things that you can do to try to boost new growth. So one of the things that I think is really neat is you can have like a community commenter night where we've all been to a store that's just got like rows and rows and rows of a bunch of commons and chaff and whatever from every other draft and sealed event that we've all ran, and then left the cards on the table. And yeah, it's nice to have that bulk for when people show up for an event and they're like, oh man, missing that one common because I thought I had 3 and I only have 2. But for the most part, we have an excess. So what you can do is now it takes an effort, right? You don't want to leave this up to the store. Like, you have to do this as a community, but you just sit down and you build a bunch of commoner decks, maybe during your downtime while you're at an event at the store, right? Like, if you win your match fast, you start sorting and you throw together commoner decks and you put them all in a pile. And then you have a night where you invite people to come and learn the game. And just for showing up and learning the game, they get to take their commoner deck with them, so that if they want, they can play it at home. And you treat it the same way that you kind of do with the learn to play stuff, but instead of with Ira, it's like with actual, newer cards. And by doing it this way as well, you kind of get to control the experience a bit better. So what I mean by that is that, the Ira decks are great because they're just mirrors, but I've had, for example, some people, when they want to pick up Flesh and Blood and they want to learn a game, they're like, oh yeah, I bought like the Prism and the Chain precons. And then it's like,
Ouch.
well, I hope you like algebra. So,
Trigonometry, drawing circles.
it's gotten better. And the history pack stuff, I think, is actually much, much better as far as new player introductory decks. And so I want to give credit where credit is due. LSS is recognizing the problem and addressing it, but also giving out those are, a little bit, it's not as cost effective as just utilizing the commons you have lying around. And then if you really want to like amp it up or whatever, then you can just give away the commoner decks, but then you could use like blitz decks or precons or whatever as the prizing or part of the prizing with the packs or whatever. But the idea is you want to entice people who have never played. And a lot of times, giving away free stuff is the best way to do it, but you also kind of want to curate the experience. Now, outside of that, if you're also just trying to like get people to show up, usually another thing that goes over pretty well is that if you are having an armory event or whatever, just ask people there, like, hey, what's something goofy you want to do next week, or what's something we want to do, like, is anybody free this weekend? I want to run a multiplayer night, just do something goofy and fun. Yeah, I think I think that a lot of people have been spoiled by social media and all of these tools we have for like organizing, that we just forget how effective like word of mouth and peer pressure is. Like, I remember when I worked at a comic store, and like it was literally when people would come in like, hey, are you going to be here this weekend? Hey, we're going to run a magic bounty multiplayer thing this weekend. Like, it'll be a good time. You should be there. Hey, we're going to do an Emperor event. I need you to be like Rusty and Ed's partner. Like, just whatever. Honestly, that's still a really effective tool that I don't think gets utilized nearly enough. Yeah, that's my short answer. I think there's like even more to it. I think that a lot of times as well, especially again, like if you want to take the commoner decks and go a step further, there's a lot of stuff you can go and like do out at community events as well. But that's a different thing.
Yeah, I think with us, there's a little, I mean, growth is always important, right? You don't want to ever just be done growing. But I think retention is equally important in a lot of cases, because you end up growing and then you lose players. And sometimes you lose players because they're just not having a good time for whatever reason. And so from there, it's like you got to figure out what's the thing that you can do to like reinvigorate the good time so people are having fucking fun. Because if people aren't having fun, they don't want to show up. And so like I'm thinking of things like, why don't I partner with a brewery and do flesh and brews? Why don't I work with somebody else on some other goofy shit? Like, it's probably some outreach things. It's probably wrapping other things into it that people are interested in. Like there's the several places in town that are that they have people sit and have coffee, and then they have adoptable animals that are wandering around and greeting people and such. Like, I don't know, like I would want to hang out and play card games around a bunch of dogs. That sounds awesome. Like maybe that's a thing, right? Like it's gonna be something that's out of the box, and by box I mean usually the four fucking walls of a game store, because there's only so much you can do within those walls to create. But if you create different experiences that have sort of a more of a bonding thing, like, man, remember you were already about to kill me and that Doberman put their face in your nuts and you just completely forgot to get lethal? That was hilarious. So, okay, maybe not that, but the point being, fun story, interesting little tidbits and things like that. They do drive things, little memories. What? You have 100% been headbutted in the sack by a dog before.
Oh yeah, for sure, but not while I was playing cards, you heathen.
What, is that supposed to be like a special occasion? Are you supposed to be taking out like the hole in the sheet for the dog? I don't. What the fuck are you doing? Like, what? Why is this like some sacrament?
No, it's more like, of all of the things, you could have been like they stepped on our combat chain, but you were like, nope, it's got to go for the balls. Like I was just more. This was your jump, sir, and I was showing my disappointment.
I don't think that's true at all. I'm pretty sure that was right in line. Was not off the rails at all. That's all my take. Last listener question.
We're never going to get that peanut butter sponsorship that I wanted now. Thanks.
You fucking god damn it. You're right. We're not. Good to know. We're gonna move on. Jim Neeman, which I think is one of your people, right?
Yeah, it's Ben. I listen, I would say one of my people, but I haven't been in so long because Wednesdays are the worst day for me. Yeah. If you're listening, Ben, get Ken to move it back to Tuesday nights, and I will be there.
All right. Well, you heard it here first, Ben. His question is, when Ira LLs, should she be replaced with a new demo deck, or do the current History Pack 1 Blitz decks fill the introductory role? If you guys made a new demo deck for the game, would you pick a new class or stick with Ninja?
So for me personally, I do think that there should still be somebody that would replace Ira. And my reasoning for that is that, yes, I do actually think the History Pack 1 Blitz decks do a fantastic job of filling a hole that we needed. But even still, so one of the things that Ira does very well is it teaches people who have never played a card game. I think that the Blitz decks are very good for people who have already played a card game to pick it up and learn how to play the game. But we have to remember that there are two types of players, right? There are people that are coming from other card games, but there is the possibility that people who have never played a card game might try it out. And Ira's static ability being so basic and so easy to understand is important for a number of reasons. One, obviously easy for players to grasp, but also when you're talking about it from like a game design perspective, what it also does is it teaches you without you thinking that it's teaching you about other important facets of the game, like the combat chain, for example, right? Because her ability applies to the second thing. So even though they're just like paying attention to the, hey, I just get this random +1, they're actually subconsciously also learning about the combat chain as well. So I think just having another hero that does something very, very seemingly basic, but also helps teach the core tenets would be a very big boon. And it could even just be like the anti-Ira, right? Like it could be instead the second card you block with from hand gets, +1
That's what I was
defense or
thinking of, Vanilla Guardian.
whatever.
Yep.
And the reason I say that is because I've actually even seen posts on Reddit where somebody was like, they asked a question and then there was this back and forth, and it was very apparent that this player didn't realize you could even block with 2 cards from hand. Yep. Right? Everything was centered around like, well, I can only block for 3, and you're like, no, you can block for more.
12.
Yeah. So I just think that there would still need to be something to replace, Ira's role, because I really do feel like she excelled at teaching people how to play a game if they have never played a card game. And then I do think that the history pack stuff, it's fantastic.
It's great
for handing out to your Magic players, your Yu-Gi-Oh players, your whatever players, and saying, hey, learn the game. That's good enough. But I would like to see Ira replaced with something if she LL'd.
Yeah, I think a Vanilla Guardian would be what I would think of, because again, you really just want something that isn't going to be overwhelming, and then give it, a static ability that you don't have to do a lot of work with, so you can just be a basic hero. You want it to be 20 and 4 as a young hero, and then something that plays a little bit of everything. So you want something that plays attack actions, non-attack actions, defense reactions, and attack reactions. And
so it's funny you say that, because if it's not Guardian, the other one that comes to mind would be just a very basic warrior.
The problem there is the attack action part. You don't usually play a ton of them. Doesn't mean you can't.
Usually, but here's the thing. That's why I say it just needs to be like a new one.
Sure.
So like, imagine the bonuses. If you've played both an attack action and attacked with your weapon, blah blah blah. Like there's a couple of different ways you could do it, but I also do personally think that like warriors being weapon focused is really cool, but I would like to see a bit more of a hybrid warrior approach, just from a design standpoint as well.
Yep, and we just name it Rao Heart of the Centauri, and then let it go.
Yeah,
I'm into it. Ship it, print it, get it going now. LSS before we don't have anything to leverage you with whatsoever. So,
or if you don't want to have it be a warrior, if you want to keep that as strictly like warriors are like priests of the weapon, right? I studied the blade. If you want to keep that, then hear me out. Give us monk. Like, let me use both like attacks, but then like also a cool bow staff, and alternate between like the idea of turning your entire body into a weapon, so everything is offense. Like, let me do that.
Yeah. All right. That sounds fun. Well, we did it. We recorded an episode with my power didn't go out.
Yeah, my internet didn't go out, and it's even raining outside, like hard.
I got no messages saying our shit is fucked. I'm really hoping when I stop this recording, everything uploads and it's just like, oh.
So this is what's going to happen. This is going to go smooth. And then tomorrow there's going to be huge news.
Oh, for fuck's sake. Yeah.
We haven't had one of those in a while.
No, we haven't. Yep. Going to get brained by that tomorrow, aren't we?
Yep.
Oh, well. Okay. Well, I'm ready to get out of here. Let's do some quick Patreon shout outs, because we did miss them last week and I felt really bad about it. So we're going to do a shout out for our associate producers, Andy and Kenny. And then we're also going to do a little bit of a shout out for executive producers on up. So there we have Blaze Storm, C-Dubs, Josh Levy, Lance Good Thrusts, still my favorite, Matt Two Tokes, Papa Mike, Alex, Philip, Rich, Taylor, and Trevor. If you are interested in becoming a patron of Flesh and Pod, you can go to patreon.com/fleshandpod. Link is in the show notes. There are 6 tiers to choose from. So peruse at your leisure. If you have any sort of question, comments, or concerns on those, you can always feel free to message me or send me an email at fleshandpod@gmail.com, or tweet at me on Twitter. Never going to call it X. We're at FleshPod. Also, if you do so happen to be in the market for any of your flesh and blood needs this month, you can also go to therealmgamingnetwork.com and use our promo code FAP5. It requires 5 to FAP, so it should be pretty easy to remember. And that'll get you 5% off your entire order through the month of August. Darick, where can they find you?
You can find me at that charmer. That's charm3r on Twitter. Again, I'm also not going to say X. I'm also just Charmer on YouTube and on Twitch. Again, the goal is in the very near future, as soon as I'm done with my office stuff, I'm going to actually do content again. But you can also find me in the Flesh and Pod Discord. If you want to listen to me cover other card games, I do an Alpha Clash podcast with somebody you may have heard of. His name is Logan. That's kind of fun. I also do Wampa Radio with Flake and Doa for Star Wars Unlimited. I'm kind of all over. So, yeah.
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 Yeah. Well, if you want to reach out to me directly, the easiest place to find me is actually the Flesh and Pod Discord. That link is in the show notes. Also on Twitter, I'm just at Logan Peterson, so I'm pretty easy to find there too. I do like kind of try to bounce back and forth between all the Twitter accounts. But you know, sometimes it gets a little difficult to manage all that. Also, if you can't get enough of us and you want to hear us talk about other shit, you can find us on the Clash Ground podcast. We'll have an episode out again this week, and probably coming a little more frequently now that the game's actually out on store shelves, and we're seeing tournaments happen. So we'll have more to talk about this week. We'll be talking to world number 1 Alpha Clash player Dagan White about his recent victory at the Alpha Clash 1K at the Realm Games in Mansfield, Ohio. So if you want to hear more of that content, or if you just want to see the game be played, there's also a VOD on YouTube on the Realms YouTube page right now with us two fucking idiots commentating. So you can always go and enjoy that shit where I get to say things like ho ho ho, and then Darick look at me and go, "Sir, those are children," because that was appropriate.
Well, you know,
I get it, but still, I mean, the fact that I'm already not canceled is still completely shocking.
I'm just looking forward to Dagan unveil the name of the deck.
I'm not going to spoil it. I'm just going to go ahead and let him make sure he does it on the show. So
yeah,
that's all I got. Anything else from you there, Darick?
No, that's it.
Remember,
let's get
Fap
out of here
5.
before Fap 5. But I was gonna say, let's get out of here before something does go wrong. We're just tempting fate at this point.
We really are. So I guess we will see you all next week for episode 90. We're getting real close to that 100 mark, aren't we?
Yeah.
Well, you know what that means. Okay. We'll see you all next week. Bye.
Bye.